guess we may as well get this out of the way. Álvaro Fernández made some comments about potentially playing his last game at CenturyLink. Can you expand on that situation?
Yes. When he signed last year, he signed a 12-month contract, which expires on June 30th this year. That's obviously not too long from now. He has expressed to us that if we were not going to pick up his option, that it might put him in the best position to succeed back home if he departed before that June 30 date. We're still having those conversations, but I think suffice to say that foreign spots are at a premium on our team, and as we look to improve the team in the summer, you could see us make a move there, and certainly want to thank Álvaro for his service to the club, not once but twice. I think that, even if maybe we haven't had the offensive output that maybe we hoped for in stint number 2, his attitude has never flagged, his effort has never flagged. I think he's been a great pro. I think he's been a great influence for our younger players, and I think he's a great guy. So definitely sad to see him go, but that's the business that we're in, unfortunately, and at the end, if he needs to get out of here a couple weeks ahead of time or something like that, we're certainly going to accommodate that, because that's the right thing to do for somebody who's earned it as a servant of the club.
So he's out here today. Is that indicative of him potentially suiting up again, or is the door kind of closed on that?
Nope, that's still possible. And look, I think if you extend from he may be going on some trials back home, I have no doubt that he wants to remain fit and play in and all that kind of stuff. And again, we want to do right by him because he's done right by us.
How difficult is that with guys on international and national duty and a guy who's key in the midfield with already a roster where you're stretching, you're looking for more guys, and he now is going back possibly?
Yeah, look, it's tough in the short term, but again, you try to remember the human side of this thing, right? Which is hopefully bigger than the club, and you want to, you want to treat people well, and you want to give them the best opportunities. We said, look, bigger picture for us, we should be getting. Looks like Henry Wingo's out there today, and seems to have had no issues from what I've seen. So we expect him to be able to contribute. Harry Ship's out there, looks like full go today. And Aaron Kovar had his first stint off the bench the other day as well. So when you talk about guys that play that same position, you're talking about 3 younger players that maybe get an opportunity. And sure, does it always hurt to lose a veteran in those spots? Absolutely. But we've said as we go from in 2015 to having I think 15 or 16 players 30 and over to now having half that, or and kind of slowly trying to whittle that number down as we replenish from underneath. I think this is the right message long term in terms of giving younger players some opportunities. And again, understanding that young players, they don't progress in a linear fashion. They go up and they go down, and they make mistakes and they have great games. And if you look at guys like Christian Roldan and Jordan Morris as maybe your 2 best examples, man, if you play those guys for a while, they're pretty good after a while. So that's what we want to do is foster a culture where we give young players a chance. We support them even when they have imperfect performances, and we believe that not all of them, but some of them will get better and improve. And so we're going to continue to give opportunities to those kids.
So would it be safe to say that health will determine whether Flacco might play this Tuesday against Portland?
Yeah, I mean, look, health of the group. Yes, Nico. Yes, health and depth and all those things, and so yeah. So it'll be a friendly conversation as it's always been with Flacco, and again, we'll certainly tell you guys when something is definitive and settled and all that stuff. But he's making his comments, and I want to be clear about this too. What he said the other day on Univision was from a heartfelt place. I mean, he was clearly, I won't speak for him, but we share his belief that he was saying something sincere. He was saying something honest. He was saying, I think that he'd appreciated his time here, and I wanted to make sure that I came out today and said we also really appreciated him, and whether or not we wanted to speak about this before we had everything ironed out is not so important as the sentiment that we want to do right by Flacco, and he's been a loyal soldier for us.
About 3 weeks ago on KJR, actually, you had mentioned that you had room for like a DP and a significant signing beyond that. Does this open up more for those people doing roster math in their head at home? The
significant signing could potentially be a TAM. So I want to be cautious here because I don't want to back us into corners where we say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because I've done enough signings, we've done enough signings that it's not so linear and straightforward. But we have the resources where in a perfect world We could sign a DP. We could sign a TAM. To be clear, that doesn't mean Lagerwey promises we're signing DP and TAM. What it does, look, but when you take Flacco's salary out of it, does it give us more resources to sign player number 2? Yes, it does. And are we targeting a DP? Yes, we are. Again, that is different than saying we have signed a DP, you know, and like with everything, we're not going to sign a DP just to live up to a pledge that we said, hey, we're going to sign one. But we do have, you know, we are pretty far along with a couple of guys, and you know, we're looking at our choices and our options, and hopefully have something. Well, I mean, we're gonna try to improve the team in the summer window, and we're gonna look to try to add, you know, at least 2 players in the summer window.
That would be kind of the maximum would be a DP and a TAM, is what you're saying for the high end.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you look at this, and I was looking at this on paper. I mean, kind of transfer window by transfer window, how we've done, and I think our norm has kind of been 2 or 3 players every transfer window, maybe 4 at the high end. I think summer of 15 where we signed Andreas and Eric and Nelson and Roman. You know, and we had. You know, it's been in that range, 2 to 4. I would expect something in the middle of that range. I would say 2 to 3. In terms of everybody knows we have some roster spots open, so you know, foreign spots are at a premium, but we have some budget to be able to go out and do some things.
In the short term, the Open Cup comes when you're missing 6 guys for international duty and that kind of thing. There will almost certainly be some short-term signings. How many, we'll find out in a few days. In your attitude, is that short-term signing something where you're giving them a test that says you might be able to earn an MLS contract this year, or is it just we need you to fill that role right now?
I'd say it's both. I mean, look, anytime you come up and play for the first team, it's a test. It's a chance. It's an audition. You know, all eyes are on you. It's a, you know, if you're playing an Open Cup game against your arch rival, it's going to be a high-pressure environment. So I think that's a great test for young players. I think with most young players, it's unfair to evaluate any performance on one performance. You know, you're going to look at their body of work with S2, you're going to look at their body of work with the academy, and you're going to look at what the first team needs. But yes, if you have players that play well in Open Cup, will they be considered for further opportunities? Absolutely. And do we have roster spots open such that we could promote some players? Yes, we do.
One of the things that's come up with this last international window was the Gold Cup, where you guys are in potentially a similar situation. Have you gotten any more clarification as to when call-ups for the Gold Cup might happen and what kind of hit you guys might take on the roster?
We anticipate losing players after the Portland game, so after that weekend. It's the best of my knowledge.
How difficult is it to bring up S2 players for a short amount of time from your point?
So the mechanics of it are just you sign a 4-day contract with MLS. That was part of the last CBA that I guess was done 2 years ago now. We did it last year with Mathers for sure, and maybe there was one more, but for sure with Zach we did it from S2 last year, and so it's the same mechanism. It's pretty straightforward. You know, the Open Cup has restrictions of 5 foreign players that can play in that tournament, so you got to kind of play with that and, you know, play with rest. And you know, I think the biggest influencer for us is, you know, we're facing another 3-game week, and so if you throw the Open Cup in there, then it's 4 games in basically a little bit more than 2 weeks. But so you're going to have some squad rotation, and I think that you will see some guys be brought in as part of that to help with the squad rotation.
Are you expecting the guys that are on international duty now to be available for that June 17th game? The New York City game?
The New York City game, yes. There is, with the exception of, I think Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jordy DeLem is playing the Caribbean Cup, and O'Neill Fisher is. No, but I say that, but I think O'Neill is back, right? Or they're back?
O'Neill's coming back, I think, after the friendly for Caribbean Cup. I don't think DeLem goes till after.
Okay, all right. So I'm thank goodness for my staff that knows more than I do, and yes, we're gonna have a full team here for the June 17 game. Jeremiah, thanks for asking the question.
You have a former player that's been in town for a couple of days. What's it mean to have Andy Rose kind of around this organization once again?
I went and had coffee with Andy. We talked for a couple hours, actually. He's a great dude. I love him, and you know, I think I wouldn't be surprised if eventually his path took him back to the United States. and hopefully, as part of our organization at some point. I don't think it's now, but I think maybe at some point in the future you might see that. He's certainly a guy who left on good terms and is a great pro and is a great person and somebody that we enjoy spending time with.
Guy who was on the field when Portland was up here for the U.S. Open Cup last time, as fans now know it as the red card wedding. What are your takeaways a couple of years away after that match up here?
Let's not do another red card wedding. I was joking with Jeremiah before he came out. I actually, my wife and I have binge watched Game of Thrones over the last 6 months or so, and so I now know what that is. At the time, I was like, oh yeah, that's a very clever analogy. And now, but having now watched it, I'm like, oh okay. Sadly, it's not that far off. If we can get through the Open Cup game with fewer than 4 ejections and a lifetime ejection and a massive injury to a star player, then yeah, that'd be an improvement from our perspective. Do I need to do like a second take with a more sincere answer?
Joking aside, though, did that game impact the way that the organization approaches some of especially the early round games of the Open Cup?
Look, here's what I would say. The franchise obviously has a great tradition in Open Cup, and I think historically it's maybe meant as much or more to the Seattle Sounders than it has to any other organization. And I think as we've pushed forward in Champions League among other competitions, I think that we've, and look, speaking for last year at least, we put more emphasis on winning MLS Cup than we did on winning the Open Cup. And I think we would make the same priority again this year, that we would say our top priority is winning MLS Cup, and it doesn't mean that we don't go out to win every game, but just that the Open Cup is maybe a little bit lesser of a priority. And again, I think that's appropriate in a year when we're trying to defend our championship. So, does that mean it's not going to be a really fun game against Portland, our arch rivals? No, I mean, look, it's always fun to play those guys, but I think both sides actually would take away from the last Open Cup game that maybe near melees on and off the field is maybe not the way to go about these things, and a little bit more decorum even within the scope of a rivalry match is probably a good idea. And again, not blaming anybody or anything like that, but it was just I think we want to take a more just a more measured approach, I think, in general, and treat it as a first round Open Cup game. And yes, we are playing Portland in the first round of the Open Cup, but at the end of the day, it's a first round Open Cup game, and that's a competition that we're going to value a little bit less highly than trying to win an MLS championship.
You mentioned the MLS Cup and Champions League. News has come out of Mexico that Superliga 2 or the Superliga in a way might be resurrected, and there might even be kind of a Super Copa between, well, in this case, yourselves and Chivas de Guadalajara. If that came final this year, what would it mean to the organization to get the opportunity to face one of the biggest clubs in the hemisphere in competition?
It'd be awesome. I mean, I'm the one who's espoused the view that we should be playing Mexican teams as often as possible, even in friendlies. And I've played a couple of Mexican teams in friendlies, Necaxa and Tijuana, and to me, it's the best competition we can get in our region. And why wouldn't you want to match yourselves up against the best and to go into major clubs anytime you can? So look, it's a great idea. It's a great concept. I have no doubt that it's complicated, both politically and financially, and with CONCACAF, et cetera, et cetera. So, we don't have an indication that it's going to happen this year, but certainly as a fan of MLS, I think we get caught up in things like how do we catch the EPL and how do we become a Big Five, top 5 league in the world, and I think we need to never lose sight of the fact that we need to become the best league in CONCACAF, and when we can consistently win Champions League and consistently beat our Mexican counterparts, that in and of itself will be a historical achievement over the first 20-25 years of the league, and I think we're going to do it, and I know we're going to try to do it, and that is, I think, a really, really significant goal of the league going forward, and something like a Champions games or some form of Superliga, however one describes that, would be great for the growth of the league.